Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange Podcast. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence, to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's podcast. Greetings, everyone. This is Hugh Ballou with a fresh episode of the Nonprofit Exchange. And, we're always talking about leadership, but we're going to focus on leadership today. Nothing happens without leadership. And so I've got a gentleman that really I haven't met till just now, but I've known about him for many years because he writes a lot of good stuff. And it's always fascinating to see what he's going to blog about. And he's very, very consistent, and he's very consistently good. So Dan Rockwell, tell people about yourself and why is it you've chosen to do what you do?
Well, to tell you about myself, I'm a farm boy from Maine originally. I live in central Pennsylvania, but I was brought up in central Maine and on a dairy farm. So that really is everything you need to know about me. You're always who you were when you were 13. And when I was 13, I was milking cows and going to school. So I live with my wife now in central Pennsylvania. Our 3 children are grown. We have 6 grandchildren. I'm excited about life at this stage and giving back. So leadership, how did I get into leadership freak? Mostly because I thought I was good at leading, but I mostly sucked at leading most of the time. So I thought, and I got my MBA late in life. And so I got interested in organizational development, and I started, being interested in leadership and realizing that I really wasn't nearly as good at it as I thought I was. And so then I started writing. And I made a commitment to myself to write 5 days a week. I had never written before. It wasn't like I was some sort of, magical writer or anything, except for contracts and things like that. I had never written before, but I started writing. I said, I'm going to write 5 days a week. And if it gets traction, I'm going to keep going. That was 10 or 11 years ago. And I'm so thankful it really worked.
So what's with this title? Leadership freak. That really gets attention.
Well, it originally it's about like sports freak, you're freakishly interested in something. That's where that comes from. There's no great story. I was doodling around at my desk one day thinking about what I would like to call, a blog, and that's what came up, being freakishly interested in leadership.
So I have my background is music conducting. And so the article I refer to people to on Forbes is, what does a conductor know about leadership? And my answer is, a conductor knows everything about leadership, because you drop that baton, you got to know what you're doing, or else you've just got a grand mess on your hands. So we live in a time where people say, "Oh, I know about leadership," and I think people that say I know everything about leadership are pretty dangerous. What's one of the biggest blind spots that you think leaders have?
That they're better than they think they are, or that they're as good as they think they are. That's probably it. That people are telling them the truth. People are not telling them the truth. They're telling them what they want to hear. What are some of the? I sometimes think about the lies leaders believe, right? And I guess one of them is that we think we're better than we really are, and people are telling us the truth.
So when people tell you, "Oh, I like you, you're so good," we can't really believe it. But the intentions are sometimes good. But if you're in the culture of leadership, in a corporate culture, or even in a church culture, or an educational culture, there's this hierarchy. And I guess you learned about that when you studied your MBA. There's this hierarchy, and we might not think we have the permission to speak directly. Is that part of the equation?
I think it is part of the equation. I think in one sense, too, we need to get over the idea that hierarchy is always a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing. And there are leaders, and there are people who have certain responsibilities that other people don't have responsibilities the same. So it's all right to have that. But I think if there is permission to speak the truth, if that actually exists in an organization, then it is something that the leader has done. It's very unusual for people who follow a leader to not, listen to the cues that they're giving off. And sometimes leaders give off cues that I've made up my mind and I'm not interested in what you have to say. My way is the right way. And, a lot of people will just go along with that. And I think in church world, especially in, some church traditions, there's a strong pastoral leadership model. This is a great challenge for leaders, right? Because on one hand, you want people to buy in, you want people to contribute their very best, you want to learn from them as well. And in a strong hierarchical situation where you have strong pastoral leadership, people will do more head nodding and agreeing and then go out and execute. And they'll do that fine, but you won't necessarily get their best. And that's, I think, one of the great challenges in church world where there is strong pastoral leadership.
Yeah, I think there's not enough time in seminary to study leadership. So you have to we've inherited this autocratic model. Now, what we teach in Center Vision is the transformational leadership model. It's about the vision. It's not about you, Bubba. It's about the vision, where you're going, and you really build. It's the conductor model. You build high performing teams. You build a culture that responds to the nuances, and really you don't tell people what to do because they know what to do because they got the plan. So one of the deficits I find over and over, besides what you've identified, is that people don't have a really clear estimation of their own skill set and are not aware of their own blind spots. But they think they can just move forward, especially those of us who are entrepreneurs. We think we can just move forward because it's in our head, and we kind of create a mess. So what's the, in your world, what's the relationship of having a plan? I'm a recovering Scottish Presbyterian. Everything's decent and in order. We got to have a plan because a musician has a very rigid plan. We're like programmers. We got rigid structure, but we've got to be creative within that structure. So what is your opinion on the deficits that not having this structure sets up for us as leaders?
Well, let's first of all just say that vision without a plan is wandering in the wilderness, right? I mean, you got to have a plan. You got to have a vision too. And I love that you preface this with like skill sets and gifts, and then you transition to, what's the plan? And I think these things go together, right? In other words, the farmer who has a barn full of racehorses might as well not hook them up to a plow. It doesn't matter what your plan is. A team of racehorses will not plow the field, or vice versa. If you have a team of plow horses, you're not going to enter the Kentucky Derby. Well, you may enter the Kentucky Derby, but it's not going to go well for you. So when we think about plans, how do we plan? Part of the plan, obviously, is the vision, but another part of the plan is, who are the horses we have in the barn? What are they like? What are their strengths? What are their gifts? I love when Paul writes to Timothy and he says, fan in your gift, fan into flame, your gift, fan that into flame. Is an awareness that, you can have all the plans you want, but if you're not aware of your strengths, if you're not aware of your gifts, if you're not leveraging them in service to the plan or in service to the vision, then they seem to be squandered.
Yes. Yeah. Eva, I know how you think because I've read your blogs. And so you probably don't know much about me, but I saw one, you mentioned 13 milking cows. Now you had a blog just recently, I believe, about 7 things you learn when you step in crap. And there's cow pies make grass green. Talk about that a little bit. You have a lot of 7s and 5s, things that I can check off in my mind. So talk about this stepping in the piles.
Well, I just was thinking about, I'm going to bring that up, by the way, because I don't want to say anything too stupid or something that I didn't already say. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to contradict actually, I don't mind contradicting myself, but I wanted to write about some of the tensions and the difficulties and the challenges that we face. And so that's when I started thinking about stepping in cow pies or whatever. And then it just occurred to me, you look out over a pasture and you see these green patches all over a pasture. And what are the green patches? Those are the places that the cow has done their business. And that, unlike us, they don't mind doing their business in public. So I think, what I love, one of the lessons of stepping in cow crap is you can spot these people who have done it well, they've stepped in it well. And that is they're kind, they're compassionate, they're patient with others, and I think maybe with themselves as well. But you can always see somebody who has suffered well because they're merciful and they're kind. You can see somebody who hasn't suffered well, they get all ticked about stepping in the crap, and they're angry and they're frustrated and they're pushy and they're complaining. So that was thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, I I do some, at least I used to do some live keynote speaking. Hope we go back to doing that again. And very often people would introduce me as an expert in leadership. And I would come on, I say, well, I'm actually a student of leadership, which is still true, but I don't shun it anymore because at almost 75, I'm old enough to have made all the mistakes at least once or twice, and smart enough that I've learned from some of them, most of them. So that really gives you, I've gone to reclassifying those mistakes as learning opportunities. And you and I have been around a little bit. So talk about some of the learning experiences that are valuable to leaders leading and stuff we're talking about. We're talking to nonprofit leaders and clergy, but this is stuff that's applicable anywhere, isn't it?
I think devaluing the power of listening is probably one of the big mistakes that leaders make, especially young leaders. And when I think about my leadership in my youth, I was way too anxious to kind of craft everybody's attitudes around what I wanted them to be. I was way too eager I was in convince mode. My job is to convince you that I'm right. And that's just a huge, colossal waste of energy and talent on the team or in the organization as well. So I think one of the huge mistakes of young leaders in particular, at least young extroverted leaders, would be that talking is leading. And no, leading includes listening, lots of listening.
It's remarkable how many leaders think it's important to have all the right answers when really having the right questions and listening carefully to the answers is probably a lot more valuable. If we stop long enough to listen, as a musician, we're trained to listen, but can we transfer those skills into a non-musical setting is the question. Can we transfer the skills we have into the current situation? So let me run this one by you. And I want to change my background image here. People often assume that aren't a conductor that the conductor is the dictator, and so that's an autocratic model. Do this, do this, do this. But I say back, just because you got a little white stick, you got union musicians there. You really can't make them do anything, but you can influence them. So talk a little bit about influence in leadership, how we influence people both positively and negatively. Did you like my analogy, by the way?
I loved your analogy. So if you think that leading is like dominating, if it's telling everybody, then you never get the best from people. You get compliance. You get compliance from fearful people. You get compliance from sincere people who think, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. You get compliance, but compliance is never getting the best, where people are just, they're showing up early, they're staying late, they're giving their heart to what's going on. So I think making people do things, which by the way, you can do to some degree. right? You can get outward conformity. You pay somebody enough and they'll do what they're told. But doing what, getting people to do what they're told is not leadership. That's a dictatorship. So when we think about going beyond that, how do we get beyond that? And the first thing, and a lot of things come to mind, but the first thing that comes to mind is modeling the way. You know, this just speaks back to Kouzes and Posner in their book, The Leadership Challenge, where they have, I think, the 5 functions of leadership or the 7 functions of leadership. The first one is model the way. And so the leader who wants something beyond compliance is going to model the way. They're going to model things that bring out their best, and they're going to model things that bring out the best in others. I mean, you know, you could go back to listening as one of those things as well.
So that is one of the basic tenets as I have defined transformational leadership, and it fits very well with the conductor model. One of the great teachers of conductors says what they see is what you get. So based on what you said, modeling is really the culture is a reflection of the capacity and everything that the leader shows. I mean, we can say whatever we want, but it's like your children, they're going to do what you do, not exactly what you say to do. So we do set the bar. We can set the bar high, or we can set it in a negative way, can't we?
I think we can, you know, by those behaviors like isolation, for example. You know, the leader who closes the door and isolates themselves, that's a negative modeling that says other people aren't important, that relationships aren't important. So yeah, we can definitely model bad behaviors, do it all the time, right? And did it all the time as well. You say things that you say things that, you know, suck the life out of someone. You know, these ideas about bringing out the best and you know, kind of fueling people's fire versus you know, throwing cold water on them. That's, to me, the essence of being a successful leader.
I in my 4th book is an anthology of stories of transformational leaders. And I asked my friend Cal Turner for an interview, so I went to interview him. And he said, and then subsequently I had him on this series years ago. And this guy's a really faithful Methodist. He's got the Wesleys in his office. I actually met him at a job I was doing in a Methodist church in the Nashville area. And he's a man of faith and very clearly a leader. So he's on the show and he says, Hugh, I went to my team at Dollar General. And I said, my father founded this company and I got this job because of my genes. This job as president and CEO. I don't have you got the skills, but I got the vision. And I'm the boss. He said, boss is double S-O-B backwards. It was right in the show. So I said, oh, yes. And he said, worse than that, I'm the son of a boss. And so he said, because he said, you got the skills, I got the vision, everybody on his team stepped up. And then afterwards, we were debriefing. He said, Hugh, leadership is about defining your skills and your gaps and finding very competent people to fill those gaps. He said, consequently, we went public and it was very successful and everybody benefited. And he said, if I had pretended that I had known everything, they would say, I want to show him. So how many leaders have you met? There's this myth of having to have the right answers, but they bluff their way. So talk about bluffing rather than being sincere and being straightforward, transparent.
Well, I asked Mark Miller, what would he tell his younger self? Mark Miller is, I think, VP of leadership at Chick-fil-A or something, leadership development. I forget what it, high performance leaders. You know, they have big names. Anyway, I asked Mark, I said, what would you tell your younger self? And Mark said, I would tell my younger self, don't think you need all the answers. There's so much stress. So you got to walk around, you got to know so much. So I recently had a conversation with the former CEO of Best Buy. And when he introduces himself, Yeah, Hervé Goulet is his name. He's a Frenchman, and he says, "Hello, I'm Hervé, and I need your help." Now that is powerful. That is powerful. It you, First of all, we all know you don't have it all together. Everybody knows. And sometimes we know you're kind of pulling the answer out of your anatomy somewhere. You're like making something up. People know this. It's not like you're fooling anybody. So the better option is to courageously just say, wow, that is a great question. I'm not sure of the answer. You might say, what do you think the answer is? Or you might say, who might know the answer to this? Or you might say, I'll get back to you. Let me do a little research. I'll get back to you and give you an option, or a thought about what the answer is. But this, this idea that leaders have all the answers, I think what it does is, again, it sort of drains the life and energy out of people. If I think you're the answer person, then I don't have to worry about the answers. You can give me the answers. But you can always tell these leaders, by the way, there is a path to their door. People coming for answers into their office. Everybody has a problem and they want the leader to solve it. And let me tell you why that path is there. That leader loves having the answers. They feel important. They feel like they think like, oh, I'm a genius or whatever. So they train their people to walk to them. And then what happens at one point later on is they're exhausted. And they're like, can't anybody come up with a decision on their own? Well, guess who made that world? The leader who needed to have all the answers made that world.
So that pretty much describes corporate America, doesn't it? We're feeding leaders into mid-management from MBA programs. And so you got an MBA degree. It means you know everything about leadership, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I was visiting with a guy in a city which will remain nameless, working for an airline which will remain nameless, but its abbreviations are United. And he meeting this guy, and he got a new MBA boss. And the guy says, "Hey, come into my office." He said, "Sit down. This is how we're going to do things." Open the manual, and my friend said, "He said what?" He said, "I wrote that manual." Oh, it's so the fallacy of knowing it all. They don't know what goes on below them in the system, so they didn't work their way up. So what are some of the typical blind spots that you see that leaders really need to be aware of?
I think believing that the job is easier than it is a real problem. So you're sitting in your office and you're deciding who has to do what by when, and you're assigning tasks or whatever. And the belief that the job is easier than it is and it won't take as long as you think it's going to take is a huge blind spot that shows disrespect for the people who are on the front line. One of the best things I think a leader can do is spend a little more time on the front line, spend a little more time rubbing elbows with the people who are actually doing the work, not simply, in meeting. We know this, right? That the higher you go in an organization and the larger that organization is, the more talking you do. You sit around in meetings all day long and you talk. And there is this perception that talking is the same thing as doing. No, talking is not doing, right? And so we get this feeling that things get done easily. I think that's maybe, one of the blind spots that leaders can deal with for sure.
There's probably a whole lot more. So
Yes.
you're listening to, if you just happen by on Facebook, you're listening to and watching the Nonprofit Exchange. We, for almost 7.5 years, have interviewed fascinating people on multiple topics. The foundation is leadership. And today we're talking to Dan Rockwell. And Dan has a really prolific blog. He just writes a lot of stuff. There's picture of a handsome dude. It's leadershipfreak.blog, leadershipfreak.blog. And he, don't erase a good compliment with a stupid but. I got a good friend that wrote a book, Get Off Your Butts, B-U-T, but this, but that. So what is your inspiration? I mean, you turn out quality stuff on a regular basis. So what is your inspiration to think of new things constantly? How long have you been doing this, by the way?
10 or 11 years.
Do you ever run dry? How do you get inspiration?
Yeah. So this is a great question, Hugh, and people frequently ask me, how do you write? I write 5 days a week now. I've written 7 days a week before, but I'm writing 5 days a week. And, how do you write 5 days a week? And where does all this come from? And first of all, I just screwed up a lot in my life. And I'm, you make a lot of mistakes, and then you learn a few things. So part of where Leadership Freak comes from is I'm solving my own problems, and I continue to solve my own problems. But here's something I think that's really useful for leaders. And I think it goes beyond just me writing Leadership Freak. And that is, if you want to pour a lot out of your life, you have to pour a lot into your life. And this is a real issue with leaders. They're burning the candle at both ends. They get burned out. They get exhausted. That is because they weren't pouring enough into their lives. So the principle is this: if you want to serve a lot, you have to pour a lot into your life. If you want to pour out a lot, you have to pour a lot into your life. I always know when the ratio of pouring out is too high, because I run dry. If I am pouring enough into my life, then I am able to. I have more to say than 5 days a week. The blog post that you brought up about 7 things you learn when you step in crap. Well, there was a lot more to that post, but I set a limit of 300 words, and so I didn't publish the whole thing. I, just had to cut things down as much as possible. And so there's a lot. The answer to the question of where does it come from? I'm pouring a lot into my life early on. And this will help, I hope will help your audience as well. First of all, just the principle: pour a lot in if you want to pour a lot out. And people, oh my, we have to have people in our lives. They make us richer. So right before our call, I had a conversation with a fellow by the name of Lou Burgess. And they sent me this book, his book. This is not coming out until June, but they sent me his book, Wanting. This is life-changing for me. So, and it's not unusual for me to have these conversations with people who are smarter than me and done, so talented and gifted. It's not difficult to find people like that to have conversations with. So when you think about, Dan, how do you do all of this? Pour stuff in your life. It's books, it's mentors, it's people that you can have conversations with. It's quiet time. I mean, seriously, how do you do this? You have to have quiet time. So there's this little light back here. In my office, I keep the blinds completely closed. All in the morning, the lights are off. I see nothing. I just have this little light on. I'm small. I'm quiet. It's out of the quiet that we find strength. It's out of the quiet that we find like ideas that, that sometimes are surprising. Right? I'll start writing something and I'll come upon an idea and I'll think, wow, that's good. You know what I mean? I like it. It's like, holy cow, and it's not like I planned to write it, but so there needs to be some quiet. There needs to be smallness in life as well. You can tell I have a lot I could say about this because people often ask about it.
Well, the burnout is really high with clergy and nonprofit leaders, higher with clergy. And there's a number of roads that lead us to burnout, and not having this quiet space, this time for regeneration, fun, relaxation, even time to think is so valuable. I have to put time on my calendar. We tend to want to had a conversation with my wife who's clergy and works with lots of clergy in the district from the district office. So lots of calls, lots of people to talk to. And the danger, especially now that we're home and doing everything on Zoom, is just putting things back to back. The black hole is now the Zoom. And so my practice is to schedule now. The now is when we're actually talking, and then to have the buffer. So I do 25-minute or 50-minute sessions. So I have a buffer in between. That's just walking around time. But I also need to put down thinking time, time to catch up with everything I promised in all those calls. So we don't give ourselves the grace of giving ourselves the space. I want to come back and talk more about burnout and what leads there. I want to do a commercial. It's for one of our sponsors. We publish Nonprofit Performance 360 magazine, and it's targeted to, it's strictly leadership articles. And I have a hunch that you will see some writing from Dan Rockwell in future issues. It comes in an envelope like this, and it comes with your name on it and a copy of the magazine, and then this little code here lets us know that you've got it from the post office. So if you have a company and you want to connect with a nonprofit audience, we can target specific demographic or psychographic. So you could deliver your message directly to a targeted audience with your offer inside the envelope on top of the magazine, your ad in the magazine, but your offer would also have a QR code and a business reply card so people could respond directly to you. If you want access to that market, then our sponsor is WordSprint. WordSprint helps us define marketing programs, top of mind marketing. We stay in touch with our tribe with consistent messaging to the right person in the right rhythm. So you could ride on our reputation. Our open rate for the mail is very, very high. Our response rate is alarmingly high because we always deliver content right into people's hands. So Hugh at centervisionleadership.org is how you get a hold of me. And that's on anything you see here. If you're watching the podcast on the web, or you're watching it on YouTube, or you're listening to it on the podcast, then the email is right there. Respond to me, and we can talk about how you can give more prominence to your brand by associating with the brand that we have. If you want this program for your entity, wordsprint.com. Bill Gilmer and his team have been doing this 20 years with 2.5 million campaigns. They know that it's about relationship and maintaining relationship with your tribe. Wordsprint.com is one of our primary sponsors. So the myths of I got to work until I drop, the myths that I've got to do everything myself because I have to be willing to do what I ask other people to do. So what are some of the pathways that lead leaders, especially in the sector we're talking about, nonprofit leaders and clergy? The burnout rate is high. So what are some of the pathways that we need to be aware of and that we can stop getting to that burnout phase?
Well, you mentioned, I think, something that's really important and people are terrified of, and that is how you manage your schedule, right? So you mentioned 50-minute hours, and a huge fan of this, right? Do not schedule, don't schedule, back to back to back to back. So put the 50-minute hour. That's good. I think the way we see ourselves is the way we see the world. And so if we see ourselves as the solution, as the answer, as whatever, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to always be there, always be available. And it's not just a nonprofit world. In the for-profit world, leaders find it difficult to walk away. They find it difficult to go home at the end of the day. There's one more thing. We got to do this, we got to do that. So learning to trust people. And this is so interesting, I think, that burnout is sometimes a symptom of lack of trust. I cannot trust anybody else. So I have to do everything. And this is and I'm talking, I'm coaching leaders who are in the for-profit world. And, I had a leader just 2 days ago. I said, "What's preventing you from going home?" He's working 2 to 4 hours longer than he needs to work every day. I said, "What's preventing you from going home on time?" And he had the chutzpah to finally say, "I can't trust people. I have a trust issue." See, and he's going to burn out. And we think, oh, he's burned out because he's overworked. Well, he's overworked because he can't trust people to do something. So scheduling is a big factor in dealing with burnout, and I think you're a genius on that, as how you do that. And then learning to trust people is another. Oh, I want to, if I could, I just want to go back and how I'm doing my schedule. So if you called me for an appointment, I'd open up my calendar and I would look. And I have a certain goal. Don't tell anybody this, but I want to have as many open days as possible. I am not impressed with myself when I see, a calendar full of appointments. I don't think, "Oh my, you're so important." No, I think you're an idiot. Why are you doing this? Right. So I have a goal that Monday I don't have any appointments. Now, I can't always keep it, but I do have a goal. And I also have a goal that Friday is the same way. I don't have any appointments. And if I do, I try to schedule them early and have them done. But here's a scheduling tip. When someone calls you for an appointment and you open up your calendar and you see that you have 3 hours open on Tuesday and you have this other spot over here open, do not schedule it on Tuesday. Protect that time. Personally, I would rather go 3 or 4 appointments in a row, 50 minutes, not like right up to the top of the hour. I would rather go 3 or 4 appointments in a row and protect a morning or afternoon than stick that in there and then disrupt what could have been time for reflection, time to read, time to walk, whatever it is. So I think one of the mistakes we make when we schedule is we look for open time. No, protect your open time as much as you can. That's just, that for me, that's been working.
Well, there's a certain amount of energy, a rhythm of boom, boom, boom. You got several things in the. I get in. I'm an extrovert, duh. So I generate energy with people. So I've got the next one and the next one, and it's so important to have some downtime. So some of my. I want to ask you about your favorite leadership quotes, but I want to give you a few. Let you respond to them. Jim Rohn: work harder on yourself than you do on your business.
Yeah, what a fantastic quote. I know a few leaders like this who are committed to personal development, and they understand that the organization is not going to grow beyond them. And so they hire coaches, they go to training, they take time for themselves, they read books, right? They do all of these things that help them develop themselves. That's such a great quote, isn't it?
I love it. I love it. Quote, and the best people were always in the front row in his speeches, and he'd point that out.
Yeah.
How about James Allen? People want to change their circumstances, but are unwilling to change themselves. They therefore remain bound.
Yes. This speaks to me about desire. This speaks to me about what does a person desire. And if we want to see people change, and I was almost said if we want to change people, and that would be dumb, because we don't change people. People change themselves. And people do change. All right. This idea that people don't change, that's malarkey. People do change. And if we want to help people change themselves, I think we speak to desire. And what do you desire? What's that quote about? If you want people to go to sea, right? What's that quote where don't teach them how to build boats and cut wood. Teach them how to long for the sea, and then they'll build boats. So I really think personal change and organizational change, it has a flame under it of desire. Where does the desire come from? And how do we fuel desire? And how do we see desire?
How about one from Father Richard Rohr, Franciscan? He says, how we do anything is how we do everything.
Wow. Yeah, I've never heard that one before. So that's a great one. So how we do anything is how we do everything. Is this about patterns? Is this about ways of seeing ourselves and ways of seeing the world where we fall into patterns? Is that what that is?
I think it's about people want to behave like clergy want to behave one way in the pulpit, but then do something different in private life. It's about people in a professional situation pretending to be professional, but they misbehave in their private life. And so I think it's we're gonna be consistent whether we like it or not. So if we try to lie, we're gonna give away ourselves.
Ah, fascinating. Great quote.
Yeah. He also says transformed people transform people.
Hmm.
So those are a few of my favorites. Let's switch to, you got a bunch of books back there. And you've I'm going to share my screen one more time for those who are on video. If you're not, we'll have some shots on the website. They're you compile your writings, which is a great efficient way to, you've already writing, so you put them into complete work. So you've got collections, leadershipfreak.blog on the resources page. So talk about what people find here. These must be PDFs. They're, yes, $3.99. They're really inexpensive. So you have a lot of stuff that's free or low cost. So what's your inspiration and why should people have these?
Those are really, I'm selling convenience is what I'm selling. So everything in there is has already been written, but I did put everything together for like teams, building vibrant teams. I put lots of different articles together on teams, but several of those are simply 30 days worth, and they're categorized. You're buying convenience. They're categorized by a topic. So during a given month, I would have, not necessarily intentionally, but I would have written on 5 or 6 topics. And so I collect them all up and organize them by topics.
So I read the work of G.K. Chesterton. He must have had a personality like Churchill, um, who I think said the illusion with communication is that it has actually happened. Um, but Chesterton said, I do believe in Christianity, and my impression is that a system must be divine which has survived so much insane mismanagement. So so it's like Bill Gates had the successor that even as bad as he was, it didn't destroy Microsoft. It was just totally incapable as a leader. So the organization had so much energy, the leader couldn't destroy it. But that's not always true. The leader can lead us into a downward spiral. So if you're working in an organization and you're working for somebody that's really leading the wrong way, is there any option except to leave?
Wow. So we're thinking now about influencing up, right? We're thinking about, managing up, influencing the leader. And in some cases, I mean, some leaders are so hard-headed that it's a lost cause. I suppose that's not a very good thing to say, but the bigger the personality, the harder it is to crack the nut, right? So it's like they don't pay attention. But I think there are if you're in a downward spiral sort of situation, you have a sphere of influence, use it. So maybe you lead a small team, maybe you're leading a project. So I would say, first of all, if you want to change the downward spiral to an upward spiral, focus on the people who are immediately around you. You may not get to the boss or the pastor or the leader of the organization. And simple ways to do that would be begin the meeting by saying, let's talk about wins. Where are we winning? And I'll give you another one. So years ago, the first company I was asked to work with, they called me. They thought I was going to come in and wave a magic wand over there and solve their issues. And we all know that's not the case. So anyway, they called me. They came in. They said, Dan, we have a dark culture. Things are sad around here. And we spent some time together. I said, what would you like to do about that? And they made a simple plan that I have shared ever since. So they started asking, they said, when we're walking down the hall, when we're getting coffee, when we're, just having casual conversation, we're going to start asking people what's working. what's working. So I went back a month later. I said, what are you learning? And they said, here's what we're learning. We've had people in our organization for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. This is what they're telling us. We've worked here for 10 years. No one has ever asked us what's working, because we have a problem-centric approach. Bad is stronger than good by about 4-1, 5-1. And when I say bad is stronger than good, I don't mean morally bad, versus moral good. I just mean a bad experience is stronger than a good experience of equal intensity. And the ratio is astounding. So in organization, if you don't know this, you start to talk about problems. Those problems get an inflated value, right? It's what did Daniel Kahneman say? Nothing is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. So you talk about problems, you're thinking about problems, they become more important. They become heavier than they really need to be. We need to know this as leaders, that there is a tendency to focus on problems. And so if you want to shift the trajectory of an organization, you have to shift the things that are being focused on. You don't worry. Problems will find you. I'm not saying ignore problems. All I'm saying is what we got to bring into the mix is we need to bring in conversations that turn the culture toward a forward movement, that talk about wins, that talk about what's working, that talk about strengths. I have been at conference tables with high-level leaders in organizations, and I have them do an exercise. I'll ask them to say I'll say, hey, there's Billy Bob over there, and everybody, 2 or 3 of you are going to say, when I see you at your best, I see you, and you're going to fill the sentence out. When I see you at your best, I see you. And honest to goodness, we'll go around the table. I have seen corporate leaders with tears in their eyes because we don't do this in organizations. We are so focused on what's wrong with people and how they need to be better and what's wrong in the organization that we miss the whole point of leadership is not just going with the flow, right? Leadership is creating a flow. And in this case, what I'm suggesting is if we have darkness, if you have a dark leader, if you have sadness in an organization, start influencing where you are. Shift the conversation from, I shouldn't say shift because it sounds like you're not going to talk about what isn't working. Add to the conversation healthy doses of what's working.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're having conversations. I mean, the topic is conversations that build culture and fuel performance. And everything we've talked about today is the leader's duty and delight to be that inspiration, that influence on the culture. Because people do look to us, even if they don't tell us, we are influencing people in everything we do. So Dan, who in the leadership world has been an influence on your learning in your life over the years?
Yeah, lots of people. We'll talk about living leaders, and I suppose early on, Doug Conant, who was the CEO of Campbell Soup, asked me to lunch, and he has an office in Philadelphia, and I live in central Pennsylvania. It was about 2.5 hours. I don't know if he knew that it was that far, but I didn't care. I was glad to meet him. He's humble. He's compassionate with people. He has this saying, be tough on standards, be tender with people. He's had a big, he has an influence on me. The people that I talk with, it seems like everybody has an influence on me. Here's the I was telling you about the former CEO of Campbell Soup. He's written a book called The Heart of Leadership. And that he has influenced me in the way he has this ability to listen. And Lou Burgess in his book, Wanting, he's influenced me in a profound way. Stan Endicott, who founded Slingshot, it's a Christian search company, right? I saw Stan Endicott say on a video to a young fella who was playing the guitar, he said, when did that guitar become so comfortable in your hands? And I thought to myself, I want to be like that. So he's had an influence on me too. The list is so long.
And you got books behind you. Do you have a favorite book or two besides the one you just highlighted?
Yeah, usually my favorite book is the one I'm reading, but not always, but often it is. And when people ask me about book recommendations, I suggest The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. I already mentioned it. They distill leadership into 5 functions: model the way, inspire shared vision, challenge the process, enable behaviors, and encourage the heart. So they kind of give a framework for leadership. If you haven't read it, it's useful, and they're also humble, really smart people too.
There's a whole lot of really smart people in the world, if you look for them. So we get, what's a good pattern for leaders to focus on now that we're hopefully coming out of this time of seclusion? Now, some of us like it. I'm a reformed extrovert. I'm enjoying my introvert time. But I've heard people say, oh, we need to pivot. Well, it's not really pivoting, and there's no new normal. There's no old normal. I like to say there's a radical new paradigm for leading. So what is your suggestion that leaders think about and embrace for leading in the future?
Yeah, I'm gonna say choose your admirations carefully. Admiration forms aspiration. So I admire this leader. I admire that leader. I'm getting inspiration from, such and such or so and so. And so moving forward, I mean, you can say, oh, control your schedule, or, you can take quiet time, or what, there's all of those things are important. But I think one of the most impactful things we can do as leaders is to intentionally notice our admirations, and in particular, choose our admirations. Who are we admiring? Because admiration forms aspiration.
Hmm. Hmm. So I like to say that the foundation of leadership is relationship.
Hmm.
And one of the leadership methodologies I embrace, transformational leadership, is so consistent with the conductor, transforming cultures and leading by the vision and modeling, but also the work of Murray Bowen, a psychiatrist. And he's known to have said that which is created in relationship can be fixed in relationship.
Hmm.
So we tend to want to give up with people rather than continuing being in relationships. So talk about the relationship and leadership and how essential those two partners are.
Yeah, I've been very slow coming to the party on this, and that's one of the things I would say to my younger self is you need to have relationships with people who are outside your sphere, people who are inside your organization. Yeah, results come through relationships. We don't have to choose results or relationships. We think about results through relationships, and it's everything. The customers that I have ongoing relationships with, those are the people I keep doing work with. But it started with the relationships, and then they kept coming back to me. I think influence, you want to influence people. The people you are in relationship with are more likely to be influenced by us than the people who see us from a distance. It's a powerful idea.
It is. It is. It is. So we're coming up the last few minutes of the interview. I want to ask you about managing your own energy, and then how do you fuel energy in others that are in your spheres of influence?
Yeah. So just real quick on that, I think knowing your rhythms is important. So I'm a morning person. And so I'm going to do the hardest work, the most important work when I'm at my best. So manage your energy by knowing your rhythms of energy. Are you a night person? Are you an afternoon person? Maybe it's from 3 to 6, whenever it is, know that. I think other people's energy is so powerful too. How do we manage other people's energy? So I sometimes will have leaders do a chart of their own people, like every hour. Just when do you see them at their best? When are they really seem to be most vibrant? When do they seem to be most productive? And keep that for a week, and then go talk to them about that, so that they can also see when are you at your best, and how why is that important to you? And let's face it, come around 1 o'clock, for me, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm not going to do anything productive. I'll probably concentrate for 15 minutes or at the most. And then I'm going to start chasing squirrels and rabbits, right? I need, and then later on, 5 o'clock or so, boom, I come to life.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. 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 So I'm going to do one more sponsor moment. Then I'm going to come back to you for a wrap. And, what do you want to leave people with? A thought or a challenge to do something? But our sponsor is ourselves. Center Vision has this online community for people working in communities, building communities, whether you're running a church or a community foundation or a chamber of commerce or cause-based charity, or you're an educator. We're doing worthy work. And like we talked about today, you are the influencer, you're the driver. Nothing happens without leadership. And better things happen if you're constantly working on your own set of skills. So if you go to nonprofitcommunity.org, nonprofitcommunity.org, here's this community of like-minded people that are focused on bringing value to others. Nonprofitcommunity.org will take you there. So Dan, this has been a lot of really good sound bites, a lot of good stuff. We can't begin to scratch the surface of your extensive knowledge. So I want to direct people back to leadershipfreak.blog and just read his stuff. Get on his list. I get your emails 5 days a week, and it's always worth reading. What do you want to leave people with today?
I think it depends on the day, but today I'm thinking about just saying, we need to know we matter. And, we're more powerful than we give ourselves credit. So the people around us, they may be, we have the ability to encourage them. We have the ability to demotivate them. And so know you matter, and kind of walk around, not like arrogant. I don't mean that. I just mean you have a place and you have the opportunity to influence people. And so have that kind of confidence, not arrogance, but confidence.
Well-spoken words. Dan Rockwell, thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your inspiration with our audience.
Yes, thank you. I so appreciate the opportunity, Hugh.
Thank you.